Okay, Comfortable Universe with Dr. Pete. Song of Everything, and we're talking about Luca. Life being everywhere because it's formed so quickly and easily here on our ordinary planet called Earth. Now, scientists are obviously really conservative and cautious, and they're not going to place bets, they're not going to talk about speculations. We have found life only here, one place on Earth. But we're finding all this evidence for how easy it was. I've just been talking about Luca, the last universal common ancestor, and how it apparently formed only 200 million years after the Earth first formed water, after the Earth became habitable. And Luca was a complex organism living in an ecosystem with a lot of buddies and a lot of enemies hanging around. What was life like back then? All we have left is Luca. Now, there's two ways that science could describe how life might have formed here on Earth. The first would be that it's so easy to form that it formed multiple times. That our lineage could have been just one, and they could have found other microbes, other life forms that aren't related, that don't genetically connect at all to ours, which would prove that life formed more than once. And they've both managed to survive, multiple initial life forms all managed to survive. However, and then the other argument is life only formed once, and it therefore isn't all that easy to form. But our Comfortable Universe Song of Everything common sense argument, even into this little detail about how life initially formed, says that Luca, our only surviving common ancestor, killed off, outcompeted all these other buddies, and there may have been 1,000 million different ways, different times, places, in the very early chaotic, gigantic 194 million square mile laboratory that is the surface of the Earth. Back then, in the early bombardment of the asteroids, Luca just happens to be the one that outcompeted all the others. So life could have formed in many times over and over, and then things sorted themselves out. We're living on, and even back then it was even more of a homogeneous planet with things being moved around. We only have one ecosystem, the Earth, for these simple life forms. They can pretty much live everywhere. And so they had to compete with each other. There wasn't a choice. They couldn't stay isolated. If they did, if there is some that stayed isolated, maybe, what the heck, maybe we could find a life form that's living 100 kilometers down in the mantle of the Earth, which has completely different genetics. Maybe we can find this life form that is different, that is not part of our known life on Earth, right here on Earth. But in any case, our argument is that just like humans are the only sapient Homo species that survived, we outcompeted the Neanderthals, the Denisovans, the Homo erectus, the Heidelbergensis, the little hobbit creature. I forget its name. Maybe it's the Denisovans. I'm not sure anymore. There used to be coexisting many different humans of different genetic ancestry. well, common ancestry, but once they emerged, they were separate from one another. But none of them survived. We probably just killed them off, not necessarily actively, like, you know, beat their heads in, just outcompeted them. So that could very well be what happened with Luca, with the final winner of the game of life. So the argument that life only formed once and therefore it's on Earth and therefore it's not likely to be super easy doesn't hold water. Now, this is a speculation, but I think science can explore that direction, and they have to some extent already, and they will be continuing to do so. But that's our number one case. Luca started very early. Luca was not simple, but already very complex and lived in an ecosystem, and it only took it 200 million years to form. Then we'll go back to the other main discovery. How did life itself start? Not Luca, but Fuca, the first universal common ancestor, or just the first life, the first little simple cell. What was the environment in which it formed? There are new ideas now, and I already kind of hinted at them. It's basically the asteroids, the meteors, the rocks coming from outer space, or from the protoplanetary disk, and crashing into Earth over and over and over during that very early bombardment in the epoch called the Hadean, which is Hades, short for Hades. When the Earth was a hell, except for life, it was probably their heyday. So we're going to go into that next, and then maybe that'll be all for now.